Resuming Weird World Order broadcast. Dynaphones connected. Initiating broadcast signal in
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ladies, gentlemen, and knights of the Nerd World Order, this is the Nerd World Order broadcast. I am the man that you call Dukes, and to my right, it's all about the...
Booyah! What's up? It's your boy Joe, baby.
And to my other right, coming in at 178 adamantium filled pounds, coming straight out of Krakoa, Alfonso X-Man Flores.
Everybody's always trying to tell me how my life's supposed to go. Nah, I'm gonna do my own thing.
And here Alfonso is doing his own thing on the Nerd World Order broadcast. Ladies, gentlemen, and knights of the Nerd World Order, strap on your web slingers, your web shooters, and get ready for a spoiler-filled conversation for Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse. This was a great movie. It opened up big. There was a lot of anticipation. But we'll let Alfonso X-Man Flores bring you up to speed on the previous Spider-Verse movie.
All right, at the end of Into the Spider-Verse, you have Miles Morales, pulling the lever or pushing the button, taking out Wilson Fisk, wow, and destroying the Collider, which is supposed to make it so that other people from other universes cannot come through or go through or be mixed up, whatnot. And shuts everything down. Everything goes back to normal. But, he leaves off missing poor Gwen, remember? Hi, I'm Gwen, Wanda.
Oh, okay. So for me personally, I didn't go into this movie expecting something I would enjoy. I think I expressed concern before that there was going to be a lot of too many Spider-Mans, and it was just going to be really confusing and it wouldn't be easy to follow. I'll say overall, I thought that the plot was a little bit too complicated, a little bit too bloated, but I don't feel like they could have done it any other way in order to get where they did by the end of the movie. But I really enjoyed the movie. I liked all the characters. So I thought it was a great transition from the first one. Great setup for the third one. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I think we had talked about this on a previous podcast, like whether or not we were kind of hyped up to watch it. So I went in, kind of hyped up, more hyped up than normal, even though Marvel through Phase 4, I know we keep saying this, let us all down. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of looking forward to it. The way they did it with all the Spider-Mans in there was my concern as well. But I like how they did it. They showed like a group of Spider-Mans, but they only had certain ones that they used that they brought in. And, it was pretty cool. Like we'll go into more detail, but, just the Spider-Mans who grew up with like the 1970s made an appearance. The really popular, spectacular Spider-Man cartoon Spider-Man showed up, so definitely a good transition from the first one to the second. And the second one, you had mentioned it to me. It was like Empire Strikes Back. And I asked you, whoa, Empire Strikes Back for me was like better than the first one of Star Wars. But you said, you know what I'm talking about at the, when you watch the movie. And at the end of the movie, I'm like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah. I wasn't really a fan of Empire until I watched it later. And the end of the movie, I was like, whoa. Like it made me want to watch Jedi right away. And luckily I could just stream the next one. But yeah, this movie left me on the edge of my seat, and it felt like everyone was in peril. And I was like, let's get going. Why do we have to wait till 2024? They should have filmed it like The Matrix, greatest sequel of all time, in which they simultaneously filmed the second and third one.
Yeah, I'm going to say this thing was like, oh my gosh. I like the cliffhanger. I've had people tell me that they were not excited about this cliffhanger, but you're ready for more. It's like you get to a point where you're like, man, this movie is a little long. And then you start getting invested again and you're like, oh yeah. Wait, no.
So I'm going to throw a question out there to you guys, and spoiler alert, ladies, gentlemen, and knights. I'm going to give you a fast X spoiler. That was a cliffhanger too. So the summer's given us 2 cliffhangers. Who had the better cliffhanger? Spider-Verse or Fast X?
Well, I didn't watch Fast X, so I'm going to go with Spider-Verse. unless what I see online is true that Optimus Prime showed up, I'm still going to go with Spider-Verse.
Joe?
I would have to say the Spider-Verse, and the reason why I say that is we kind of already know what the Fast 11 is going to be. It's going to be the same old car racing, spectacular stunts, and cameos again, stuff like that. Where Spider-Man 2, it left us like, where do they go from there? You got like Miles, spoiler alert, where Miles is like the Prowler. And, like for me, I'm like, where are they going to go with this? Is he going to be the villain with Spot? Are they going to team up? Or is he going to end up being a good Prowler that ends up helping Miles Morales get back? What does Spot do in the next movie? So I'm kind of looking forward to that, because you don't know where they're going to take it. Are they going to, what if Toby ends up in that one? What if Tom Holland ends up in that one, or Andrew Garfield? Like, we don't know what to expect. Where Fast 11, we kind of already know the gifs of where they're going with it.
Hey, I kind of want to bring up, I want to touch on your the whole Prowler thing. Dude, there was a couple things in there. Like, okay, I watched the movie twice. I went, opening night with some friends, and then I had to go Saturday again with my kids. All right. The second time when I went Saturday, I noticed something. So when Miles crawled into that window that night of his bedroom, and he puts on his jacket before his mom pops in, that jacket was green and purple, which are the Prowler's colors, right? And I was like, oh, and I was like, I didn't want to say anything to my kids, because I don't want to mess it up for them. But I was like, oh. And then later on, I also saw when I saw a TikTok, actually, because they explain everything, where Miles, the first time he meets Spider-Man, the very first time he meets Spider-Man, the one that died, when Spider-Man's spider sense went off, it was blue and red. And then you look at Miles, and his spider sense went off, and it was green and purple. And then it went back to Spider-Man, and it went back to Miles, and Miles all of a sudden turned to red and blue. So it's like his whole, you could tell that, what was meant for him had changed. And it was like, whoa, that was pretty deep, impactful.
Which Spider-Man died?
The original Spider-Man from Miles's universe, that original Spider-Man, like, he met up with him. It was played by Chris Pine, and he was blonde. He met up with him, and he's like, whoa, you're just like me. And he goes, all right, kid, I'm gonna teach you how to do all this stuff, but I got to go stop this first. And then he went off, and he got killed. And Miles was like, oh man, how am I gonna learn how to be Spider-Man, right? And then that's when Ben Parker, or not Ben Parker, but the other Peter Parker came, and then all the other guys came from the other universe, and he showed him how to be Spider-Man. But yeah, the Spider-Man from that world, that Earth, what is it? It's not 42, it's whatever that one is. 6. No. Anyways, he had died. It was weird. Yeah, there was a whole, I can't remember, you don't remember it because there's a whole press conference, J. Jonah Jameson talking crap. Mary Jane was like, he was more than a husband, he was a hero. And then they even referenced it in this new movie where who was it? Miguel O'Hara was telling me, he's like, your Spider-Man was supposed to live because he met you, he died. And you changed everything, because he's basically trying to call him an anomaly. And he probably wanted to go after Miles in the first place anyways, but it seemed like the other Spider-Man talked him down. That's just what I got out of that conversation, but I don't know.
Yeah, I do recall that now. So thank you, Alfonso, for, bringing me back up to speed. I guess I should have watched the last one before I watched this one. It's interesting because I did also see that TikTok, and I just said scroll because I'm not invested in TikTok like other people are. One of the things about this is, how would you guys say it compares to the first one? Alfonso.
Yeah, man, I love the first one. The first one, it was a game changer. The different art styles merging into one, big movie. Even like the frame rate was different for Miles originally when he was learning how to use his spider webs, right? You got the Peter Parker Spider-Man that was, the hobo Spider-Man, like we like to call him. He was going around and he was at the proper frame rate for cartoons nowadays. And Miles, as he's trying to figure it out and shooting it off his web with the one hand, the frame rates were a little slower, and so you can see it was a little more choppy. And as he got to learn how to use it, as he figured it out, his frame rate changed in the middle of that. I mean, I'm learning so much stuff about this stuff. I mean, I know things about frame rate and everything, but the fact that that's those subtle things that they do in these movies, amazing, spectacular. It's actually web of. See what I did there? No. Anyway, this new movie, there was so much in it. There's so much, and I didn't get overwhelmed. There were things where like, oh, I was pointing things out left and right in my brain. I'm like, I got to watch this like 5 more times just to figure out who everybody is. But then there were things that I didn't recognize, and I was so okay with that. You know what I mean? This movie had a lot of heart. The first one did too. I'm going to say they're pretty damn equal because, I mean, I can't. It's like they fall on top of each other. I really feel that they're just as good as the other, and I'm okay with that.
So, ladies, gentlemen, and knights, if you're ready to take your first shot, we ask Alfonso to choose one, and he refuses. So thank you, Alfonso, for being, if nothing else, consistent, unlike Spider-Punk. So I'm going to jump in and say, when I talked to Joe initially, I said, you know what? I put this one behind the first one, but I thought about it, and I said, this movie, to Alfonso's point, could say it had heart. I feel like this movie had an emotional connectedness that I didn't get in the first one, because I look at it like this. You remember what it's like to be an annoying teenager through Miles Morales, but at the same time, you can identify with the parents. And so it's like, for me, I could put myself in both places, and I could see my kid and Miles Morales, and I definitely saw myself in the dad, and the mom was just awesome. So I'm gonna have to say I like this one better because, first of all, the visuals, the artistic style. For me, Spider-Punk, his artistic style, dude, that just made the whole movie because it was so fresh, original, and it just popped out. I'm like, I may want to see this in 3D just so I can see Spider-Punk to see if he is even more visually amazing than he is right now in 2D, possibly 1D. I don't know. Triple D, I don't know. Yeah, so I'm making the decision. I'm throwing it down. I'm saying this one is better than the first one. Joe.
Yeah, we had discussed that, and I'm glad I swayed your decision there, buddy. But the more I thought about it, I think I might make you think about changing it a little bit. What they did right in this one that I very much enjoyed is they started off with Gwen. So they gave you kind of like her origin story in the beginning, like the first 10-15 minutes, I think it was. I enjoyed that. I thought that was really cool how they started off with her. And then it goes back to Miles. I appreciate how they gave the mom more screen time, where the first one was like about, mostly the dad. And so like I felt like they created her character more in tune to who she was and a parent. Makes me wonder if the third one, if they're going to start off with the Peter that trained him. What if they start off like that, where he starts talking about what had happened and stuff like that, and it transitions? Because the first one's Miles, then it's Gwen, and it'd be cool if it's Peter, because those are the 3 main people in that series. The one thing when I think about it is I do think it's better than the first one, because of the story and to Alfonso's point, the heart. But some of the issues that I had with it, it's this. So Miguel tells him you're an abnormality. You shouldn't be Spider-Man in that universe. My question is, when he saved the Indian Spider-Man's dad, you saw that, the little hole in the ground where it was tearing up the reality or their world. Why didn't it happen when, he became Spider-Man? because it changed. They
Here's
didn't.
why. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, bro.
That's okay.
Because that was one of the challenges for me, because there's anomalies
Mhm.
and then there's canon.
Yeah.
The difference is in
Lazy
a canon.
writing. Don't mean to cut you off. Lazy writing.
No, it's okay. In this episode, we will cut each other off. No, but there's basically, that was kind of one of my things.
Mhm.
Canon is one storyline. You change canon, that's when you mess stuff up.
Mhm.
The only anomaly that ever existed, which was not the same thing as changing canon, was Miles. So that's why. Go ahead, Alfonso.
But you're also kind of dictating what you choose as an anomaly and what you don't. So how can you sit there and say if he rescues his dad that's not canon?
No, I get what you're saying, but
You,
before
you
you go,
pick and choose what you want canon and anomaly.
right, and that's the whole argument in the movie. That's awesome. But what I do want to say is when the Spot was explaining that he grabbed the Earth 42 spider and brought it over to Miles's universe, you saw that spider creeping up on somebody, and you didn't realize at the time, but that person that he was creeping up on, you see his back, it's all those braids. It was Miles anyway. So that universe was supposed to have Miles as Spider-Man. That spider was going to Miles. So that's
Again, it's from a different universe. That's
Right.
not supposed to be there.
But-
That is creating that. So pretty much that spider is an anomaly.
Well, yeah, in Miles' universe, but in that universe, he was supposed to actually bite Miles still. But you know what's funny is you've got all this going on with Miguel O'Hara, Miles
Mhm.
Morales, Gwen Stefani. Sorry, they're all. I mean, every other person back there is a Peter Parker.
Mhm.
Why are all these people in charge of the narrative when you've got so many Peter Parkers back behind them?
Well, see, that's another thing. That spider that they took from 42, that creates an anomaly because it's not there to
Oh, yeah.
bite. So you see what I'm saying? So it's like because if that's supposed to be the Miles Morales that turns into Spider-Man in that universe,
Mhm.
you just brought him into a different universe. How does that not create an anomaly?
Oh, it does,
Because
but it was
that's
still.
not canon.
I
It's
just wanted
it's
to
when
bring.
they choose when they want to do canon.
Yeah,
You
I
know
just
what I
wanted to
mean?
bring. I just wanted to bring up the fact that it was heading for Miles Morales. So just
After he brought it, you know what I mean? We don't know if that spider was going to do that in his world. If in fact he's the only Miles Morales.
it was that close.
But it's the only that's just like that whole end game thing.
Mhm.
Well, you know, time travel is this and this and that. And that's the same thing when you start doing anomalies and what's canon, what's not canon. You know, and another thing it blew my mind is like if you remember Doctor Strange 2, where she says you're from 616.
Mhm.
And then what does Miguel say? Don't get me started at Doctor Strange and that Spider-Man from 1999.
Right.
Then it goes back to when I don't remember her name, please forgive me. She plays Miss Marvel, where there's a book
Right.
that says it's 1999, which
Right,
she
right.
says that's the universe that they're in. It's not 616.
Right. Yeah, I think the MCU is going to change that because it wouldn't make sense to make it 616 because 616 is the comic book. It's reality. It's the comic book world that we know and love.
Well, that just explains why Phase 4 sucks.
But it's just like it does. Like if we were all from different universes, I would say I'm from the Prime universe. You would say you're from the Prime universe. Dukes would say he's from the Prime universe. We would all think that. I don't know how it's resolved who is.
So I'm going to address Joe's canon are the things in a story that always have to happen. Why, if the Prowler didn't die, Spider-Man's story, as I think maybe you explained this to me, Joe. Spider-Man, regardless of the universe, always has to experience a tragic loss. Always. So there are certain things that every Spider-Man story has to have. That's canon. Always canon. That's pretty much saying no matter what universe you're in, your story always has to go this way, no matter what. So canon and being an anomaly, which is even in that universe where since there was no Spider-Man in that universe, like they don't have to worry about canon because there's like no Spider-Man. But in the universe where there is an anomaly, they still have to follow canon. They're completely separate ideas. So to me, they're not necessarily, picking and choosing when to do it. Just the opposite. What they were saying is you always have to follow canon because the story always has to be the same. You always have to have that tragic loss, whether it be like Uncle Ben, so he lost his uncle, or the captain. It always has to follow that same storyline. I don't know enough about like Miguel O'Hara to know if he followed that same storyline, but that's neither here nor there. No, you're right. You basically said, bro, Phase 4 sucked. Phase 4 was the biggest experiment, and we're just going to do what we want to do. So when they said that was Earth 616, it was wrong. And now I feel like they're trying to fix it, which is why they said it so many times. They're like, hey, Doctor Strange was from 199999, which is going back to how it was before. So I look at it like this. Alfonso basically said in every universe, you think you have the prime universe, but your universe is not going to have the same name. So basically they were all saying like, hey, this is my universe's number. Everybody knows it's a different number. But what they're saying is when they did that whole thing with Doctor Strange, they identified the wrong number. So, yeah, dude, I didn't have the problem with which you did, but I feel like the story did get a little bloated, which was my only takeaway or thing that I could say bad about the movie. However, I do got a question for you guys. Now I'll start with you, Alfonso. Is this the best sequel that you've ever seen?
It's tough because it's so fresh. I'm at this point, I'm going to say yes until I can actually stand back and really look at everything. But at this point, I'm going to definitely say, yeah, it's my favorite right now.
Wow. Dang. Joe looked disappointed in that answer, but at least you picked a side.
Because I was thinking like, man, is he going to make a decision or is he not? Is he just going to be like, oh, and then run us down to every Spider-Man movie that was created?
As far as Spider-Man goes, I would say I absolutely loved the second Sam Raimi Spider-Man. Like for me, that's the best Spider-Man movie of all time. Ooh. So I'm going to put that one above this one. As far as sequels go, we have The Matrix Reloaded. You could have muted your mic when you laughed, Alfonso.
Sorry.
Joe muted his mic when he laughed. That's rude. And of course, we have Captain America Winter Soldier. I don't put it as the greatest sequel and not even the best Spider-Man sequel. What do you think, Joe?
What makes it good for me, now if we touched on it, is the animation. Like every time they brought in a new character and or villain, the animation changes. And you just get lost in animation. Like you just watch it, you just like, oh yeah, that's right. There's still a story going on. You just like certain angles, and just for me, I'm more invested in this Miles Morales, which is dope for us. You know what I mean? It's dope for us. He's our Spider-Man. And it's just cool to see him, come in the shape of him being Spider-Man, from the beginning. And we get to see him from the beginning, and you can see where he's going or where he's at now and where he's going to go. So for me, like Alfie touched on it, it's like, it's the last Spider-Man movie that I watch, and it's really good. And so I think if I watch it again, which I will, I'm going to like it even more. But I honestly, I thought Far From Home for me, just because of the nostalgia of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield was just so huge for me. I didn't think there'd be something that's going to be coming any close to that as far as a Spider-Man movie, and I was wrong.
Wow.
Before we get too far off on this one subject, I wanted to bring a couple things up as far as the whole captain thing. They're talking about how the captain thing is such a canon event. It's new. I mean, Uncle Ben is as canon as you get for Spider-Man. The whole captain thing, it's like, did it feel like they were just thrusting that upon us? Did you get that feeling?
Yeah, I felt so too, because I'm like, Uncle. See, you're trying to trick us because everyone thought it was Uncle Ben.
Yeah.
Now you're trying to say it's Uncle Ben dying, oh, but it's also like a captain. If they go to captain, they die too. And it's just like, wait, what? And then, like now in the comics, I don't know if they changed it, but like when they broke down Peter Parker's parents, they were both agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Right,
And
right.
then, they got murdered. And so, like every Spider-Man, it's weird because they made it sound like every Spider-Man in there had a captain.
Yeah.
They don't. The only captain that I can think of is Gwen Stacy's dad, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And then Gwen's dad.
And then Miles' dad now. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like
Miles'
maybe,
dad. That's it, though.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, to your point, you probably just answered the question. They're just doing the captain thing because his dad's a captain.
Right, right. and then the other thing I wanted to ask you guys about, the whole part where they're talking about the captains being a canon event, and they're showing them the videos or what the images of all this happening, and they showed Andrew Garfield holding Dennis Leary, and he's dying and he's crying and he looks up, and Miles looked over to the Peter Parker and he's like, "Did that happen to you? Was that because he's Andrew Garfield?" Or was it just because he was talking about the same event? First, I had to go back. I was going back and forth in my mind. I probably missed like 4 more minutes of the movie because I was so lost in that conundrum. Did you guys think that was the same?
I think he was just asking him, has he suffered like that?
Yeah.
Because that's the captain was in the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. It didn't happen in the Tobey Maguire one, right?
Nope. No captains.
Yeah.
Captain
So
Crunch.
I think they just added that. It's kind of weird because I thought his uncle dying as the Prowler was the significance of Uncle Ben for him because he was really close to his uncle.
Yep.
So for me, that's where I thought that's where his. But you remember, I had told you, I think I told you, Alan, or maybe my son, that he was going to have to. The whole thing was him having to pick whether or not he wants to. They're going to let him save his dad, and it was pretty much was that movie.
Right.
Yeah, there was no captain in most Spider-Man versions, but I was okay with that. I just took it as creative liberty, but yeah, it was like that never happened. Joe's absolutely correct. Aunt May had to die in the 199999 universe because she was the equivalent of Uncle Ben in that universe, and the Prowler was the uncle in that universe. So that was just some very bad writing, because
Right.
So yeah, you're right. I can't argue with that.
Yeah, but I'm okay with it. Like usually when Marvel does bullarchy stuff like that, it just makes me mad. Basically, again, I think we say it's Phase 4, but with this movie, like I'm okay with it. It didn't affect me too much, just the overall story didn't. Those little details that I do mention, it doesn't bug me enough to think that this movie is bad.
Speaking of the movie being bad, there were a lot of Spider-Mans in this movie. Who was your favorite Spider-Man? I'll start off because I love Spider-Punk, but being a guy who collected comic books in the 90s when everything blew up, the Scarlet Spider was so perfect as far as like, that's like, my son was like, that guy was stupid. He was annoying. I'm like, that's how heroes were in the 90s. And they just captured that. It was like, dude, like, I was like, dude, they basically made a Rob Liefeld character and put him on the big screen. So I love that. He was my favorite. I'll turn it over to you guys. I love that.
Ben Reilly, he was voiced by he was voiced by Andy Samberg, and I think he went a little heavy with it. I don't think it had to be that. But now that you're saying that it's like a Rob Liefeld character, I totally see that now. And one big complaint I've had about all these Spider-Verse movies, all 2 of them so far, is the fact that we haven't had the 616 Spider-Man, the one we all know and love and grew up with, the actual Peter Parker. He hasn't been in any of these movies yet. So like, he doesn't even, he's not part of this story. But is that Ben Reilly, the one from Earth 616? Because that's what happened. The Jackal cloned him, made him, and he's like, oh, well, I'm sorry, I'm Spider-Man. He's like, well, I can still do some good. I got the powers, and I got the brain, I got the memories. I'll just dye my hair and call myself Ben after Uncle Ben, and I'll use Aunt May's maiden name Riley, so I'll be Ben Riley. And when he goes off to like I don't know Texas or something, who knows? But he was fun to watch. I really loved the costume and everything from back then. And when he showed up, it was the nostalgia just hit me like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. But I got to tell you, Spider-Punk killed it for me. He was absolutely amazing. His artwork was just, it was so like classic, punk rock from Britain, where you've got somebody posting something on the wall, gluing it over, and then somebody throws something on top of it and glue it over, and then all the multimedia and the government issued stuff. It was perfect. It was so perfect. And that was another thing I was looking at too. He was in comics, like every frame is different, right? Or in the new cartoons, like older cartoons, you would have the same frame played for like 4 or 5 or 10, I forget what it is. But in the Spider-Verse, like everybody else it's a new image every frame, right? Just slightly different, right? But with him, he was a new image every third frame. So it's like it was a little bit of a lag, and you get to see that. I mean, and it was so awesome the way they did that, because they gave it that old, I don't know, British invasion type feel. But Spider-Punk, I mean, his whole line from when Mayday Parker, drops a turd in her diaper, and he's like, yeah, there you go. You want to crap on the establishment. I like you. And he's like, oh, by the way, I quit. And, he even helped Miles realize something about his Venom sting, and which is interesting because he doesn't have a Venom sting. Or maybe they were watching Miles Morning and De La Ram, but he's like using his fingertips. He's like, no, use the whole hand. Use the whole hand, mate. And, the fact that he's a guitar player, and Gwen's his drummer, and, she left her toothbrush over there. Ooh, man. He was just a lot of fun. And he just, it's what is it? Rage Against the Machine, he's everywhere. So I'm gonna have to go with that one. What about you, Joe?
I was like, which one are you picking, bro? Like, I'm like, which one? But I'm with you, dude. I like Miles Morales. I like Gwen. I like the Peter Parker, the one with the baby. But what really made me like Spider-Punk is, one, he looked badass, and two, like, when everybody, like, what makes me like, this is from what my drivers tell me, what makes me a good supervisor is I'm not like the rest. And whenever there's a mass of upper management trying to tell me you should do it this way and everyone else is conforming, I'm in the background going, I'm not with it. That's just not me. I'm not going to do that. And so for me, I gravitate to Spider-Punk when he had said that, when everyone's trying to tell him he needs to stay the course and do it this way. And this dude's like, when he says, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to do my own thing. He's like this, yeah, mate. And then like he keeps talking, like he runs and he goes like this, you know what, dude, I'm out of this joint. I quit. And he leaves. And that's why I like him, because he just sees like, yo, this is messed up, bro. Like, you guys paint a picture that is good like this, and it's really not. And so he kind of like can see through all that. And when he sees it's when something's wrong, he's like, I'm out, dude. And then he gives Gwen the bracelet. He's like, because he knows, like, I like to do that where I plan ahead and I think ahead. So when someone comes up, they're like, oh, I didn't think you think about that, because she was stuck until she saw homeboy with the note that says, yo, you're going to need this. And I thought that was pretty cool. So for me, it's definitely Spider-Punk, although I like the other ones too. But as of right now, I like Spider-Punk.
Yeah. And he had, when he quit, he threw his bracelet, or his bracelet, and he's like, I'm out. I quit. And he leaves. So earlier they had a conversation with Miles, and he's like, well, I need this bracelet so that I can come see my friends and this and that. And he's like, well, why don't you just make your own? And that's what happened. The one that he sent, that he left with, Captain Stacy, you open it up. That wasn't the same one that Gwen was wearing originally. That one, it had the studs on it. It had the spikes. It was all punk rock, but he made it himself. So somewhere down the line, he's got to be like one of those engineer brains like Peter Parker is.
One of the things that you guys are talking about is Spider-Punk. He's got himself the guitar, and music plays a big role, at least in the first one. What do you guys think of the music in this second one, Alfonso?
I liked it a lot. I mean, there was some new stuff. Of course, I'm not as hip with the music as most because I live in the 80s and 90s, apparently 70s, 60s. But it's almost like a James Gunn movie where it's, the music is a character, and everybody's got their own little anthems, and I think it hit hard and it hit well. I can't really put my finger on very many of the songs and stuff, but like it was just, I was grooving with them at the time. Even when Prowler came out and he puts the record on just like he did in the first movie, and it's like, yeah. And then but there were certain times where, like, when you introduce somebody, like their music hits, or like when something big happens, like you get that dun, 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 dun. And it was like, oh man, it hits you right in the feelings for the nostalgia from the first movie, which wasn't that long ago, but still it's just like, oh yeah, that's where it's at, right? It's such a big part of it. I gotta check out the soundtrack.
Joe, you're hip and musically inclined. What did you think of the music in this?
I thought it was good. I mean, it's like the last movie, the music was good. My son was asking me, which one did you find better, as far as like the Prowler's entrance movie, or when he would come in, or Miguel's? And if you listen to it, it almost sounds similar, but it's like a different kind of, I don't know, instrument used. How it goes, like it's a different kind of sound, but it almost sounds very similar. But my son's like, nah, they sound different. But I'm like, it's kind of like that Vanilla Ice thing where he was saying dun 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 dun. Mine goes dun 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 dun. But it's the same. It's basically the same sound. But yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. Like, I like I really like when Miguel, like his music when it came out, but nothing beats the Prowler one.
Well, you guys have made me feel like I've completely overlooked the music, because I didn't really find anything special about it. I think I'm going to have to download the soundtrack and maybe check it out again. I actually have a few songs from the first one that I use on my workout playlists. So I like the first soundtrack a lot. But yeah, this just didn't do anything for me. I didn't notice, like, oh, wow, Prowler's got his own jam there. And, I guess if it's not Limp Bizkit or Korn or Britney Spears, then I just don't appreciate it. So I'm going to have to listen again.
You lost us at Limp Bizkit.
Bro, Limp Bizkit is better than everyone.
In the 90s.
It's just one of those days.
So, including with that, I felt for, Alfonso talked about the 3 frames per second versus the milliseconds per second, and the midichlorians, the midichlorians. The art, for me, I noticed the art more in this movie than I did in the first one. Maybe just because Spider-Punk stood out so much. How'd you guys feel about the art in this one?
Yeah. I mean, the art was great. To me, I didn't see as much difference between a lot of the Spider-Man, because, I mean, there were so many out there. So it's like they all had that same kind of appeal. And you always had one that stood out. Like at one point they used the old 60s Spider-Man, and like he gets, they go right by him because he's like in 2D or something. And then they even used like the old, it's not the 90s, maybe it was a 2000 Spider-Man. He got to have a little say so, and like you could tell he's a little shorter than everybody. His art style was definitely different. What was it? The Cyber Spider-Man, he's got like all like the robot side and the guns and everything is much bigger. His artwork was a little different. It was good, but what I really enjoyed about the first movie is that every single Spider-Man had a completely different art style, and they got it to all merge at once. Now, totally great when you're dealing with 5 or 6 characters, right? But when you're dealing with hundreds, and I don't know, I'm curious to see if there's a count out there. Some of them are going to overlap. In different multiverses, things are so very similar. of course, Ben Reilly, he had his own little art style too, but it was really good. I can see why they couldn't do more, but I was completely stoked with it. Even like when they're doing the Gwen Stacy, storyline with her father at the beginning, they just kept doing different color shifting. Like all of a sudden her hair is blue, but everything shifted with that. So like as if she was in a shadow or something, like that blue dress, gold dress thing that they had way back then. But it was just such an artistic choice with that, and it really gave you a lot of feeling. My daughter was with me, and of course she's an artist, and she's like, I can't even explain it to you, Dad. You'd never understand. And I'm like, all right, fine. I won't understand. I go, like, I can appreciate art. I've been appreciating art my whole life. You can explain it to me. No, your feeble little mind couldn't handle it. As if she was speaking with Black Bolt's voice or something.
Yeah, that's pretty much the teenager mantra is you wouldn't understand. One of the things you talked about was like the shorter Spider-Man, and I feel like that is a really good showing of what they did there, because my son, he's like, oh, that was Spectacular Spider-Man. And I said, what a who? And he's like, oh, Spectacular Spider-Man, you stupid old man. Don't you know who that is? I was like, no. But the cool thing is they gave us a Spider-Man for every generation. To your point, Alfonso, the 60s Spider-Man was like 2D, right? And then they had Spectacular Spider-Man, who apparently is like Gen Z and millennial Spider-Man. I don't know. He looked pretty whack to me. Whack, y'all. But then, the 90s, Ben Reilly, that was my dude. And then obviously Spider-Punk appeals to a completely different generation. So they did a really good job of like, tipping the hat, or, whatever your generation was, whatever Spider-Man that you have. Not only did they give you that Spider-Man, but they gave him that artistic style to reflect what you remember and love.
Yeah, even the Indian Spider-Man was dope. I mean, we haven't touched on that. Like he has like his almost like Miss Marvel bracelets. I like how they did that, and they were using that as his swings. I liked the, like when they would do scenes with Gwen, like looking in the, in the window at her dad in there, and it shifts from her costume and it goes bam right into her without the costume. It's just her face. I thought that was pretty cool. Like every character had a different kind of art. That was cool because they brought in the Prowler from the Spider-Man. Yeah. No Way Home. Like it just confirmed he ends up being the Prowler, and it also confirms that there could be a Miles Morales there. So it gives you like stuff like you're just like, yes, like the Spectacular Spider-Man. When I saw him, I was like, oh, you know what I mean. And then the 70s Spider-Man, it's just pretty cool. Like, what is this, an intervention? I thought that was pretty cool. It's pretty funny, but they really made Miguel O'Hara like a total douche in a sense. You know what I mean? But I enjoyed the art very much.
Dude, Donald Glover, or Childish Gambino, as he's called in the streets, that was so awesome. He was an actual person in this cartoon, right? And then we can't forget the Lego Spider-Man. There was a whole Lego Spider-Man scene. Dude, I just found out that was done by a 14-year-old. A 14-year-old kid made that whole Lego Spider-Man portion of the movie. I'm like, what? Oh my gosh. I mean, it's great. It's amazing. It's spectacular. It's web of.
The idea that they'll give a 14-year-old a chance to do that, that's just like super cool, So I would say that it's one of those things where you can tell that, I don't know the director of the movie, producers, anything like that, but they put a lot of heart into this movie, as far as it just wasn't, they weren't trying to make money. Obviously they knew it would be successful. They knew that it would bring in people, but it didn't feel like, I'll say a lot of movies, especially animated movies, especially sequels, it just feels like a money grab, like, oh, the first one made money. We'll give you exactly the same template as before. This in no way felt like that, which is awesome. One of the things that you guys talked about, the first Spider-Man died, which meant that, basically Miles Morales took his place, and Miguel O'Hara said he wasn't supposed to be there. But the thing is, that's what happened in the 1610 universe, which was the Ultimates universe. Clearly Miguel's wrong. regardless of, hey, maybe there's an anomaly or something like that. But in Miles's universe, Peter Parker died, so that just follows along perfectly with the comic book. And the thing is, in the movie, they frequently throw down copies of the comic books, which that says like, this is my universe. And that happened in that universe. So, clearly Miguel's wrong as far as Miles affecting that universe. Cause I guess if he did, kind of like to Joe's point, it would have opened up a big hole in the ground like it did in Indian Spider-Man's universe. As far as villains go, I like Miguel O'Hara. I didn't like Spot at all. He was whiny. Not only was he whiny, I felt like his story was contrived. Like, oh, we need a way to have all this happen. So there was this guy who was there when the collider went off and he got some powers. Boom, started the movie. I didn't like him, but I love Miguel O'Hara. How about you, Alfonso?
Okay, first of all, Miguel O'Hara is not a bad guy, dude. Just because he's a vampire, he sucks a little bit of blood, which I don't recall at all. I read probably the first 12 issues of Spider-Man 2099. Do not remember him being a vampire, so that kind of threw me. I was like, "Ooh, hey." But the Spot, I actually really enjoyed. I mean, visually, the fight scene between him and Miles like not even being fazed by it. That's how much of a professional he was like beyond. I mean, because like he would throw a punch and he's like, "What? Oh, hands over here!" Just pull his head back, right? And then he'd shoot his webs through, and he'd pull a pile of trash on him. I really liked the Spot the way it was. It definitely somebody who wasn't meant to be a supervillain, somebody who wasn't planning on being a supervillain. He just had it thrust upon him, and he did what he could. I mean, he had to make ends meet. He had to steal some money, right? I love the fact that it was the bagel guy, because that scene where they're running through the cafeteria and he's like, "I'm gonna grab a bagel," and he throws the bagel at the guy, hits him in the head, and says, "Bagel." That was so hilarious to me. I mean, me and Emma just sat there and we rewound it like 3 or 4 times, watching it over and over. Bagel, bagel, bagel. Hilarious. And I'm like, it's the bagel guy. I love that guy, right? And then he got a power up. So I was totally cool with that. I mean, you had other villains in the movie too, like I'm of course the Prowler. Miles Morales is the Prowler. You had the Vulture. The Leonardo da Vinci Vulture was amazing. It's like, hey, maybe you don't want to be using fire. You're kind of made out of paper, right? Because it was basically like a big scroll, Scroll, not scroll like the upcoming Marvel Scroll Empire Invasion, whatever. But it was funny to think about that, because you've got the Vulture out of time and place. And then if anybody watched Morbius, which I had to do it, I had to watch it, and the end credit scene, you see Michael Keaton, the Vulture, in jail, and it's like, well, wait a minute, these universes aren't connected. How did he get there? So begs to believe, like, this whole event that's going on with the Spider-Man universes and the colliders, did they take maybe all the Vultures are out of place, like it's like each one shifted to a different universe. So it's a possibility. So you might see more of the Vultures. I know, like, they showed the Rhino that was sent back. I can't recall who else was being sent back in those cages. There was a Prowler, of course, but finally we got some sort of semblance of an explanation for Michael Keaton being in that Morbius movie. What other bad guys? Can you think of any other bad guys, Joe?
No, just really those two that you touched on. I'm okay with Spot. Let me explain why I'm okay with Spot. Because when he says, "I created you, Spider-Man," right? And the backfire is he's getting notoriety. Everybody knows who he is. He looks like he's living the life of a hero with powers. Where he gets affected with spots and he doesn't like it, and everyone makes fun of him. And so that's where the jealousy comes in. You not only did you make me this way, you won't acknowledge that I created you, and you won't acknowledge that I'm the reason why you're where you're at. And so I get the whole thing of where Spot comes from, and that's why I'm okay with him being like a villain, because Miles kind of created him. Even they both kind of created each other. So I thought that was pretty cool.
As Alfonso was talking, I suddenly had this revelation, right? And I definitely want to hear Joe's perspective on this, because Joe often talks about Dave Filoni as the person who's like fixing Star Wars, right? And as Alfonso's talking about how this movie kind of bridges one of the problems with the Morbius movie, like, well, how do you get there, right? And we were talking about like, well, suddenly they're going back to calling the MCU 199999, right? So I'm wondering if this movie, which I don't know why they would do it in a Sony owned movie instead of a Marvel Disney owned movie, but does it feel like this movie is trying to fix mistakes that happened in Phase 4?
I could definitely see that. I mean, there were so many holes that people were, dumbfounded with. And I don't know if they're taking it upon themselves and like, we're going to fill these holes and you're just going to have to deal with it because we said it. So it happened because our movie was more popular.
Mm-hmm.
Or did Marvel give them the go ahead? I'm curious if Marvel gave them the go ahead or they're just like, we're going to fix it for you. We got this. Don't worry. It's Phase 4. We're going to take care of this.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they, I don't know. Is Kevin Feige part of this, or is he just the Spider-Man with Tom Holland's?
It's associated. It's like
Yeah, right?
an associate. Yeah, so I don't know. That's why I'm wondering.
Well, this is what I like. In the beginning of the movie, it says comic book red approved, right? Which is dope because the writer is doing its best to be as close as he can to the comics. To your point, Alan, is why they kept doing in the issues. This is what we're talking about. Every issue, every time something happened, that's the issue, the number, and the story. And my question, and I give it to you guys, and it blows my mind. Why is Sony hitting their 2 Spider-Man movies out the park? One, they didn't do it so much later on. I would say, Spider-Man 3, and then most people didn't approve of Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. So everyone kind of just thinks Spider-Man 1 and 2 were Tobey Maguire's, as far as before the Tom Holland came out, that was the best Spider-Man. So it's, how is Sony making better movies with those 2 animation department, with the storytelling, better than all of Phase 4? Like, Kevin Feige was good. You know what I mean? Like, Marvel, Disney, what are you guys doing? Sony is just hitting out of the park, and they only have one character, and they're doing it right. They're doing it so right. Would you be happy if Marvel took back Spider-Man, or are you just happy with them and Sony? Because Sony's doing a better job with them.
I'll break this into 2 parts. The first part is the reason, Joel, you often say that DC makes great animation, and until recently, Marvel makes better movies. And I'm going to say Sony falls in the same category. Sony has made some trash. I mean, look at the 2 Venoms. Look at
Morbius.
Thank you. So, I mean, here's the problem. Animation is not expensive to make. Therefore, compared to a live action movie, special effects, everything of that nature. So, like, let's say you're going to spend $100 million as opposed to $5 million. When you're spending $5 million as opposed to $100 million, people leave you alone. They just let you do your job. They let you do what you're good at. They don't come in and say, oh, we need to add this. And oh, we're planning on this. And oh, we're building a universe, right? So Sony allowed the people who made this animated movie to just do it right, which is what happens at DC. DC just kills it and has killed it for years on the animation because people left them alone. Nobody was on their back. But what happened when DC came in and started making live action movies? Oh, it had to be this way. You have to introduce this character. You have to put this person in the movie, even though they don't fit. So that's the reason, is because animation is a more pure art form. And I hate to say that because I'm not a fan of animated movies. So that's the first point. And I'll give to you just 1 second, Alfonso, because I got a second point. Second point is I still want my Spider-Man to be in the MCU. Alfonso.
Yeah, those guys, whatever they got going on, they're doing something right. So they're like, like the Dave Filoni, the one that's, doing the research and finding out what's what. They have the answers before they start making the movie. And I think people need to really consider the source material when you're making these movies, and you can't just go off and try to, like, all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, Michael Morbius is, it just, they got to do it right. And then I'm also, it's like, what's Kraven the Hunter going to be like? I mean, Sony has been really hit and miss. They're hitting fine with Spider-Man, but of course it's associated with Marvel. Marvel's got a big hand in that. The Spider-Verse, I'm not sure how much Marvel has in hand in that, but everything they've done on their own to try to be like, oh yeah, we got this universe, we're going to make money here. They're not. So they got to realize that they need to come together. They can't be doing this stuff separately. Marvel and Sony, or whoever they got at Sony, it's not too late. It's not too late. We could save the multiverse.
I'm looking forward to the next one, the third one. I hope they don't turn this into like, a fourth one. And, May Parker, the baby May Parker has a spinoff, and they could do it, but I don't want that. It's like, this Miles Morales story is so perfect. I feel like, let's put a cap on this. Let's put a bookend on this and just be done with it. We don't need no prequels. We don't need no side quests, nothing like that. We don't need a Hobbs and Shaw for this franchise.
He's got his own team now. It's not just Miles now. So Miles has got Penny Parker back. He's got Peter Porker. He's got Spider-Man Noir. He's got a couple newbies in with them too. Oh my gosh, who am I missing? It doesn't matter. They got Spider-Punk. You got Spider-Punk. With Spider-Punk, you can do anything, right? I can't see them failing. I can't. I didn't really think this one was going to fail. I was super stoked for it. I mean, I guess I have a lot of high expectations over a lot of things. I mean, sometimes I worry a little bit, but with Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse, I don't foresee them, missing this. They've got so much. You've got a Spider team versus a Spider conglomerate, and of course that Spider-Man conglomerate team is going to be like, they're going to see the light, and slowly but surely their team is going to start, adding up. It's Morales' team. And Miguel O'Hara, I mean, he's not a bad guy. He's just broken. He can be fixed. He can have a second chance. He can come back. Because when it comes down to it, you're going to have all these Peter Parkers being like, why do we got Miguel O'Hara in charge? We're Peter Parkers, right? Miles is looking a little bit better to us. Let's have Miles put in charge. But one way or another, I don't think it's going to be bad. I can't wait to see what's going to happen with this. It would be interesting to see a few deaths, other than captains and uncles and aunts. Maybe a couple Spider-Man biting the bullet. I guess in the first movie, you did have a Peter Parker that died. So that started off was like, whoa, this is real. How about you guys?
One additional thing, Peter Parker 616 will probably appear in the third one, because why would you blow it sooner?
Right.
Just drop him in the third one. I don't want Miguel O'Hara to have this sudden change of heart. I don't want a redemption arc. Maybe he dies, that's fine. But let's have a villain be a villain and not try to, at the last minute, well, this is why he needs to be empathetic. No, let's save those empathetic villains for Phase 4 Marvel. Let's just have a villain be straight up, just, I'm mad and I don't want you to be happy. Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't consider him that much of a villain like you do. So I don't think he needs a change of arc, to your point. I just think that it's going to conclude. He's going to end up proving Miguel, like, it's what you make it. You might think it's canon, but you can change it and things will be okay. It's going to be, I'm curious at how they're going to do that. So is it going to be to your point where you say he's not an anomaly? It's canon and that was supposed to happen? Is going to be, Miguel, this is what's supposed to happen. You think I'm an anomaly, but this is supposed to happen this way. That's why my Earth didn't get destroyed. That's why the Miles Morales where he's at as a Prowler didn't get destroyed. So not everything that you say has to be canon the way you want it to be. And I think the third movie is going to prove that it doesn't have to be the same canon. It could be different. Because if you look, all of them are Peter Parker except for him. Like, is Spider-Punk, is he Peter Parker?
No, he's Toby Brown, I believe.
Yeah, you see what I mean? Like, and then you got Gwen. So it's, and then you got the animated Spider. I don't remember her name, the animation Spider Girl. And
Penny
then,
Parker.
so yeah, I mean, so it's everything's changed. So I think he's gonna prove that everything doesn't have to always happen the same thing. That's what's different about a multiverse. Things are different. It's not supposed to be the same.
And this concludes this episode of the Nerd World Order broadcast. So until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and knights of the Nerd World Order, I am NWO.
We are NWO.
Nerd redefined. It's all about the booyah.